Hello there guys, RMP792 here again, and I said yesterday that I would talk about Star Trek Online today. And, well, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. So, I've played Star Trek Online on multiple devices. I played it originally on PC, and when I got my new PC I thought, I fancy playing a little bit of Star Trek Online, because it's free, so why not? And so I went to, pulled up Steam, went to Star Trek Online, got the launcher installed, started downloading the big patch, and then my PC rebooted. And so I thought, well, that was weird. Let's try it again. And then my PC crashed again, and I thought, yeah, no. So I decided that for whatever reason, that launcher does not like my new PC. So I gave up trying there, uninstalled it, and ended up pulling it down to the Xbox One. And just played it there because it's now out on Xbox, and yeah, it's still Star Trek Online. It definitely works better on a PC. I'll tell you that much. Just from it's a game that's designed for you to have a lot of buttons to play with. You really do need a keyboard to really play it properly. You know, it mostly works on the Xbox, but it was definitely better to control on PC, is what I will say. So I'm going to be talking mostly about the plot of Star Trek Online because that's the thing that interests me most. But I'll start by talking a bit about what works and what doesn't gameplay wise. And I'll be honest, I'm going to be echoing what a lot of people have said this about Star Trek Online, and yeah, the reason it gets said a lot is because it's very true. Star Trek Online is a very mixed bag. There are some things it does really well. The Starship Combat is actually really, really good. Because you start the game with a little Miranda class ship, and you get bigger and bigger ships, and you get more, so you've got more and more weapons, and there is something immensely satisfying about the Starship Combat, because the way it basically operates is you've got a button that fires phasers, fires whatever energy weapons you happen to have equipped, and you've got a button that fires your torpedo-based weapons. And then you've got various special abilities that are determined by who your crew are, who your captain is, so on and so forth. And how you've chosen to level them up and what their specialization is, and so on and so forth. Because at the beginning you decide whether your captain is a tactical officer, an engineering officer, or a science officer, and that determines what you get in that regard. And I'll freely admit, I'm the kind of massive nerd who, when I'm playing Star Trek Online, whenever I click the button for the high-yield torpedoes, which a lot of the time actually has an effect that's firing multiple torpedoes in a single volley, I am the guy who just leans forward and just does the whole photon torpedoes, maximum yield, full spread, fire! Because I'm a dweeb. And it's really, really fun to do that. The quality of the sound effects and the visual effects are actually pretty good. It looks and sounds and just feels like Star Trek Combat, Star Trek Space Combat, and that's a really important thing. They nailed that. That's about all they nailed. The Space Combat is the best thing in the game, and you can tell the designers kind of know that because there's a lot of space combat in this game. That's fundamentally the main problem with it as a Star Trek game. You're going to be spending 90% of your time blowing up other stuff and or shooting people. Which, not very Star Trek, guys. So yeah, the space combat is excellent. But, with that said, the ground sections are not. You control your character, and you're going to be going through bases or whatever, or other starships, or maybe you're investigating a planet or something like that, and you're going to be fighting a lot of trash mobs. You're going to be just shooting a whole bunch of dudes, and the combat just is not very satisfying. Whereas the space combat, it almost feels like they were built by two completely different teams, because while the space combat feels great, the ground combat feels distinctly dodgy. You'll pull a trigger to fire your phaser rifle, and yeah, you'll fire your phaser rifle, but it just doesn't feel satisfying at all. And again, that could be because you've got far fewer skills in ground combat. So you've got less stuff you can pull out your hat. and a lot of what you can pull out your hat just doesn't feel very Star Trek. It's oh, I'm going to use my tricorder to beam in a mortar turret. I was like, what, mortar turrets? Since when is this a thing Starfleet has? And again, don't get me wrong, I could see Starfleet engineers cobbling together a mortar turret, but it still doesn't feel very Star Trek to me. So, yeah, space combat good, ground combat lacking, and then we get onto the story, really, because that's kind of the three pillars. And honestly, the story is kind of where Star Trek Online has a lot of its problems. So, background. Star Trek Online is set after the destruction of Romulus, which, as I said, comes from the J.J. Abrams films, and I'm kind of not happy with it being canon. You could do something interesting with it, and maybe they will in the new Picard show. Star Trek Online kind of doesn't. Because the opening cinematic basically established that with Romulus destroyed, the Klingon Empire acquired a new Chancellor, which means Gowron's dead. And screw you for killing Gowron off-screen, you dicks. Because Gowron's actually a really good, interesting character. So, Gowron is presumably dead. And they've got a new angry Chancellor who thinks that with the destruction of Romulus, that's a good time to expand into their former territory. Oh, and while we're at it, we might as well fight the Federation because bollocks to it. So the Klingon Empire and the Federation are functionally at war at this point. And what is it with the Star Trek, with Star Trek trying to make the Klingons the bad guys? Discovery did it, Star Trek Online did it, and we've kind of evolved past that. Is this just the Russians thing again? Because I appreciate original TOS Klingons were usually seen as a metaphor for the Russians. I mean, especially when you watch Star Trek 6 and it is blatantly the Berlin Wall coming down in space. And now that the Russians are kind of being dicks all over again, we're like, oh, well, Klingons are bad guys again, I guess. So there are actually 3 separate campaigns. One where you're playing as the Federation, which is the only one I really care about story-wise, because Federation fanboy. One where you play as the Klingons and or one of their allies, so you can be a Gorn or an Orion in that, when you're playing as the Klingons. And one where you're playing as the Romulans. And the problem fundamentally is I don't like the idea of the Klingons getting really, really uppity again and going back to war with the Federation. Because here's the thing. DS9 already did that. They did it well. Star Trek Online does not do it well. Because the main problem with Star Trek Online is it feels like Star Trek fan fiction. It's constantly bringing back stuff without really understanding why it worked. But anyway, so it's also got another really stupid element, which is something else it's got in common with the J.J. Abrams verse. Namely, you start the game as a cadet, which is fair enough. You're effectively top of your class, and you're right on the verge of graduating. And before you graduate, you and a bunch of other cadets are basically given a Miranda-class ship, which at this point of the timeline is really, really old. If you're not sure which the Miranda class is, if you've seen Wrath of Khan, the ship in that Khan takes over, that's a Miranda class. So it's a very old ship at this point, very old class. And it's basically a case of you will run the ship while you have an actual captain observing you and just seeing how you do. And that's fair enough. Starfleet does that relatively often. And then, of course, there's a big snafu and a Borg invasion and yada, 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 and you end up having to fight the Borg with your little Miranda-class ship alongside other ships. Which, fundamentally, it's a decent enough premise. The problem is, of course, after your captain gets killed, you get, you get back to Starfleet headquarters at the end. They're like, well, I guess you've earned the right to captain the ship now. And I'm like, wait, what? I'm still an ensign, for God's sake. This is the same stupidity that was in Star Trek 09. Don't give ensigns command of starships. They're not ready for it. They might have done well in an emergency. That doesn't mean they're going to be good generally. Stick a note in their file that said, commanded ship in action after previous captain was killed. All well and good. Keep an eye on them. If they're doing well, rapid promotion. Good. don't just give them the ship right out the gate. But yeah, so you are literally an ensign at that point, or you might get a promotion to lieutenant at that point. And yeah, they just let you go, loose in the galaxy with your new dinky little Miranda class ship. And as you progress through the game, every 10 levels you get promoted, and each time you're promoted, you get a new ship. Which again doesn't make sense in the way, from the way Starfleet operates. Once you're captain of a ship, you almost always seem to end up captain of that ship for a long ass time. But I'll really admit, from a gameplay perspective, that actually works really well. The fact that you get a new ship every 10 levels is actually pretty cool. And there are as I mentioned before, you can pick whether your captain is a tactical officer, a science officer, or an engineering officer. And there are also 3 ship classes, which sort of correspond to that. You've got escort ships, cruisers, and science vessels. And to put this into full context, when you reach level 40, which is captain rank, because each time you start with that Miranda class ship, but once you hit level 10, you get a choice of one of the 3 ship types. So a science vessel, an escort vessel, or a cruiser. And as I said, once you hit level 40 and you hit captain rank, your choice of ship is between an Intrepid class, so Voyager, a Defiant class, so the Defiant, and a Galaxy class, so the Enterprise D. So, that's science, escort, and cruiser. So, and once you hit level 50, which is the game's highest, the level cap, you can actually get a Sovereign class, which is the Enterprise E, which is what I'm currently pootling around the galaxy in, because, hey, Sovereign class, it's the sexiest ship in Starfleet. Yeah, I like the Sovereign class. Yeah, sue me. But yes, so for reasons that don't make sense, you've been given a starship, and then the rest of the game is basically short, series of quests. And most of these quests are given to you in text boxes, which, if you're lucky, are voiced. Usually by actors who don't sound very enthusiastic. And all they'll really do is give you some information about the quest, and then maybe you go and meet somebody and have a conversation with them, which is done in a text box. And I feel like we've moved on from text boxes in video games. I mean, unless you're making your game on a tiny ass budget. If you're an indie dev, use text boxes. That's fair enough. If you've got the money for it, I'd like to see proper animation and voice acting, and maybe mocap. Because again, we have the technology now to really tell great stories in video games. And MMOs are too much about the grind, is the problem. So there is a lot of content in this game. I mean, from especially for a free-to-play game, if you just want to be able to poodle around the galaxy for a while and shoot some stuff, there's a lot of stuff to go and shoot. But with Star Trek, you should be making interesting moral dilemmas. You should be exploring what it means to be human. Not just go here, blow up these Klingons, come home. But as I mentioned earlier, the main thing that annoys me is that this game isn't trying to be its own thing within the Star Trek universe. It's trying to be Star Trek fan fiction. And the mission where I really, really, really realised that was when I was just casually doing a mission, and then suddenly there's this weird wibbly wobbly shaky thing, and suddenly I'm on what appears to be some sort of mining colony or prison or something like that, and everything's gone very weird. And you bump into Tasha Yar, and it's all reference to yesterday's Enterprise, where for some reason after they went into the temporal portal, they've actually ended up in the wrong time zone again. So history continues to be screwed up, and you have to help them and fight them, and you get to control the Enterprise C and help them shoot their way out, and then they eventually go back to the right place, and history's restored, and it's just it's pointless. Very little of Star Trek Online feels satisfying in the long run. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's one of those if you want to, you can have your own fun with it. Games. One of the people I follow on Twitter is keeps doing runs of Star Trek Online where her entire purpose is just to make weird and interesting ships and weird and interesting crews. Like recreating the Red Dwarf crew as her bridge crew and things like that. It's if you can enjoy the grind enough to do that, fine, have fun with it. It's not my thing, but to each their own. But there are so many fan fiction-y missions in it. So right from the start, where you're fighting off the Borg almost single-handedly, and this ancient Miranda-class ship somehow takes out multiple Borg spheres and things like that. Right up to you're working alongside the Enterprise, and they keep getting actors in from past and heck, even current Star Trek. I mean, they just released an update, which I haven't bothered playing with, where you face off against Captain Killy, so Tilly's alternate universe counterpart, and the actress, can't remember her name off the top of my head, who plays Tilly actually provided the voice. And they have been very good about getting voice actors back when they want to do it. The point at which I sort of reached maximum entropy with Star Trek Online was when I was working alongside Worf to investigate a bunch of Iconian stuff. And hearing Michael Dorn as Worf again was really nice. It didn't stop that ground combat section being incredibly long and tedious, and oh god, please make it stop. And here's the thing, when you're sitting there going, oh god, please make it stop, in your video game, you've probably bollocked something up. So Star Trek Online, great potential, only about 5% of it realised. Because again, great space combat. I mean, I cannot speak highly enough of the space combat. And again, the thing where you get a new ship every 10 levels and you're just working your way up. So starting with your Miranda class, and then I'm trying to think what's the next one. There was definitely an Excelsior class that I flew at some point in there, and then you've got your Galaxy class and your Sovereign class, and just working your way up. And then and some of these ships that you can get once you're at the level cap of level 50, and you can start again grinding. You've got to do a lot of daily missions and stuff like that in order to get enough of the in-game currencies in order to afford to buy yourself a swanky new ship at that point, rather than just being given one every 10 levels. But some of those look really nice and really cool, and very, very Starfleet. Because again, most of the new ones that have been designed for this game keep the basic, saucer section, main body, pylons, nacelles design. But some of them look really kind of sleek and really kind of cool, and there's some interesting designs going on. And there's clearly a lot of love been put into the space bit of this game, but the writing is not great. Most of the actors, even the returning ones, sound kind of bored. You could tell that a lot of the actors they've got back from Star Trek are not voice actors, because voice acting and screen acting are actually very different skills. You do need to be a lot more animated, for want of a better term, when you're doing voice acting, because everything has to come from the voice. You can't be subtle and reserved and doing a lot of it with facial motion, because unless you're doing full face capture full face capture mocap, you're sitting there with the camera and little bobbles on your face, then none of that comes through in the performance. So you can tell that a lot of them are not voice actors, and thus their performances feel very, very subdued and barely lacking. And again, I don't think that's their fault. Again, they're working with scripts that are like 90% exposition dump. And maybe they've got better, because again, the Iconian stuff was about their season 6, season 7 update, and they're up to about season 14 now. So that they have added a whole bunch of content after the Iconian stuff. I can't be bothered to slog through it. I'm sorry. Satisfying as having the USS Faraday flying around the galaxy, firing off phasers, and doing my full photon torpedoes, full spread, maximum yield fire routine. Satisfying as that is, the rest of the game just isn't. So yeah. Star Trek Online, a very, very mixed bag that could have been something great. And I really hope we get a good Star Trek game at some point in the future. Because, I mean, at the moment, the best Star Trek game is the Sins of a Solar Empire mod. Yeah. Well, best recent Star Trek game. Best old Star Trek game, still Elite Force. Don't let anybody tell you different. I'll see you next time.